Tell me what you think about brokers.
Well, I'm being recorded, right?
Yeah.
So
We both know a ton of people who we're young, we're hungry, we want to do great work, grind for the next 20 years. And then by the time we're in our mid 40s or 50, we're going to have built up this thing and then we can do all the stuff that we want. I got a little older, had kids. I'm like, that's like the biggest lie in the world.
duty and obligation are things people talk about, but largely explain away. If you're working too much for the future, you're presumably not, enjoying the present as much or living for that.
What was instilled in you, do you think, made you say, but I'm certainly not going to let work dictate my relationship with my kids?
One, I think.
Hey, Justin.
Royce,
How you doing?
I'm good.
Yeah? Thanks for being on Beyond Brokerage.
I wasn't sure I had a choice.
I don't know if you did either.
All right.
And this is an interesting topic for you. First question I had written down was, tell me what you think about brokers.
Well, I'm being recorded, right?
Yeah.
So I traditionally have not had a flattering view of the brokerage industry.
Yeah.
Now that I've worked with brokers, you, Jerry, Tate, I suppose, Mario,
Tate, I suppose.
that hasn't changed really, my opinion. But no, I mean, and I'm speaking through the lens of commercial, industrial, not residential. We'll leave that animal alone. But I will admit, in 5-6 years, I've probably gained some level of appreciation that I didn't have before for the brokers. I still stick by my initial assessment, which is I think most brokers, if they can see their way to getting a deal done and pushing the transaction through as quick as possible or otherwise, I think that's really their largest concern. Anything broader about not just saying, can they help their client? Because who's going to say, no, I don't want to help my client, or I don't want to do what's best for them. I don't expect them to come out and say that. But in terms of a genuine curiosity and who their clients are, what they do, just curiosity on a broader scale, I think is lacking within the industry. But who am I to say? That's just my opinion, but that's my general take on brokerage.
And true or false, do you have a real estate license?
I do.
Okay, all right. Just so we got
I didn't
that.
say true or false. I just said I do.
Yeah, okay. So let's quickly, obviously I know what you do because we work, this is Justin Erickson and we work together. I'm in the brokerage side of things. What do you do? 9 to 5 or whatever hours you choose to work?
Okay, fair question. And I'll describe it this way. In the context, since this is called Beyond Brokerage, I think if you lined up 10 people on the street, whether they have a business background or not, and said, hey, I do commercial real estate, or I do real estate, or I do brokerage, I think you've got an odds-on chance that 90+% of those people, 9 out of 10, are going to say, oh, I understand what you do. The downside of that, obviously, is a competitive industry, right? Somebody said, well, what do you do in terms of me? And I say, well, I do economic development, site selection related work. I mean, I may as well speak in Latin. I mean, that means nothing to virtually all 10 of those people, nor should it. It's not really ubiquitous. It's not out in the ether. And so what I tell people is largely I work with economic development entities, which is going to be at a municipal level, a county level, a regional level, a state level. There's admittedly not too few cooks in the kitchen. And people say, well, I've heard of this economic development stuff. What exactly does that mean? And I would say whatever jurisdiction somebody represents. Now, most of these people are going to be public sector employees. So whether they represent an individual city or an entire state, in the case of Minnesota, Department of Employment and Economic Development, they ultimately have two responsibilities. One is maintain the job base and then grow it. And number two is maintain the tax base and then grow it from a commercial industrial standpoint. So typically or historically what that's meant is what can you do to maintain and then get new companies coming in, creating jobs, making investment in real estate to create more property taxes, more payroll taxes, those types of things. However they get there doesn't have to be all that fancy. They can be creative and it doesn't have to be pretty. But my job has been helping companies find the right locations where to go, hence the tie-in with the real estate component, but then also working with a lot of these economic development folks to figure out how do they structure what they have to offer these businesses to separate themselves as a community, separate themselves as a state to make themselves most attractive. So there's things that they can control and things that they can't. What they can control is the business-friendly climate within their community or state. They can put financial incentives behind it. So tax credits, job creation grants, different debt programs. They can offer incentives to businesses to come and do business in their community. And then there's things they can't control. They can't control what real estate is available beyond, say, industrial park land. They can't control what buildings are available for sale or lease. They can't control, at least at a macro level, what's going on with their labor market, but they can do things to influence that to make their communities more attractive. So that's largely what I do.
Okay. And I'm going kind of backwards with you just because I wanted to get that broker question out.
Sure.
Because the first time we sat down, first words out of your mouth to me was, "I don't like brokers."
Must have hurt your feelings.
All right. I know where we're starting. So we've got your take on brokers as a whole, which you're now one of. We've got what you do 9 to 5. Just in general, what else is going on in your life right now?
What else is going on in my life?
This is one of the few. This I have you on tape right now. We're just walking around the office. I don't know if I get you to answer this question. This is how I get to know Justin better.
Right. Now, what's the definition of defamation? So me personally, if that's what you're asking.
Yeah.
So I've got 2 kids. My boys are 13 and 11. So I'm in that, as Becky, who used to work with us, would say, seasons of life. And so I'm at that season of life where the boys still like to hang out with Dad. It's still okay to go places with Dad. I'm not exclusively an ATM or Uber service, but I'm trending in that direction, and I see that happening. And that is a good part of my role right now. But they still like to hang out with Dad and play golf and go camping and go fishing and do those things. So, I guess not really the question you asked, but I don't care. I'll answer it how I want to. But, I think you and I are in a unique spot. You mentioned Jerry before. So Jerry's in his 60s, no more green bananas. Where you're in your 30s, I'm in my 40s. So we're kind of, we'll just say I'm largely in the middle of you guys. And, I struggle a lot with that, do you live to work mentality or do you work to live mentality? And I don't get too caught up in that cliche, but it's a balance. I like what I do. I never looked at it as I've had a career so much as this is my job. This is my vocation, how I make a living, and so be it. Being married to a biomedical engineer doesn't hurt from a salary, benefits, and what have you perspective. But I like what I do, but I also like what I do when I'm not working too. Yeah. It's just a matter of where do you strike that balance.
All right. Well, that's a good segue then.
Good.
I got two main questions on this that I don't think we've talked about. The first of which is, and I'm very interested to get this answer out of you, based off of that point that you just made about the work to live, live to work. What is it that drives you?
So what drives me from a work ethic standpoint, I don't think it's the aw shucks Midwest good work ethic Scandinavian, but I've always looked at work through the lenses, work is a virtue, work is a good thing. Regardless of what the outcome is from financial benefit. I mean, work for the sake of working, okay, you can argue it might be foolish, but in terms of, instilling things in my boys, I think work is a positive. I think it's something that society has largely not frowned upon, but said, hey, the more money you can make and the less effort that you put in to get the money, short of doing things that are, flat out illegal, fraudulent, et cetera, misleading, we tend to celebrate people that make a lot of money and seemingly do it with ease, as opposed to people who put their head down, work hard, build an experience and a skill set, and make a proverbial good living. Yeah. I don't think that that's smiled upon or awarded the way that it once was. I look at it as I'd like to work. not to an obsessive level or some crazy level, but I like working. And, I think a little bit, I won't speak for you personally, but maybe generationally different between me and say people in their younger 30s and 20s and whatnot is, you hear all the time now, what's the number one thing people look for? Younger generation, work-life balance. I have no problem getting up and working for 2 to 3 hours on a Saturday morning before my kids get up. I've got a call tonight at 7 o'clock. Well, I'm going to be in between shuttling kids to basketball practice. That doesn't bother me in the least bit. That drives some people nuts. That's infringing upon their personal time. How can work do that? In my case, I'm not salaried, but for people that are salaried, they're like the company, they can't tell me to work. And I thought, well, it's a window of time. Who cares? It's your job. Do your job. Work. That's never bothered me. At the same time, I live in Edina. I don't think it's fair to typecast writ large everybody that lives in Edina, but
I think it might be fair.
There's Edina has a reputation, certain stereotypes, and in my experience living there for 15 plus years, I would say it's largely earned. And my neighbors are going to listen to this. I don't care if they do.
We got fire coming out.
So, but no, I think that there's a lot of people that will justify, traveling, career ambition, things where it's not them. There's nothing they could do. They had to be gone and travel all the time. They couldn't be available to do things to their kids because they were at meetings, they were on the road, they had those networking events, those happy hours, this whatever, fill in the blank. And they do it as this kind of justification as though there was nothing they could do because they had to, work their way up the proverbial ladder. And I think, no, largely that is a choice. I mean, one thing I always pound into my boys, lest they know who Susie Orman is, but I heard this decades ago or a couple decades ago was, not having enough money will absolutely make you unhappy. If you can't afford the basics, it will make you unhappy. Having a bunch of money will not make you happy, and that's an edict by which I try, not that I'm making more money than I know what to do with, but I try to remind myself that, if not daily or even weekly, certainly monthly, annually, as we start a new year, that says, I think to a fault, any person would say, yeah, if I can do the same thing and same level of effort and make more money, absolutely sign me up. You'd be somewhat foolish not to subscribe to that theory. At the same time, what do you have to give to get it? And that's something now I'm 46. I see the people that gave earlier in the career at the expense of relationships with the spouse, with friends, with family. Now they're doing it with their kids. And to a degree, they might be trapped in that golden handcuff situation of a partnership at a firm, legal, accounting, otherwise, or in a corporate scenario, or even in a privately held company. And they feel like, well, I'm trapped. There's nothing I can do now. And they offset that with, but I make a lot of money. Yeah. And so it's offset by a bigger house, a nicer vehicle, more vacations. And that is, sadly, again, where our society, I think, largely applauds near-term gratification over long-term satisfaction.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I have been continually interested in our relationship to see how you work hard and balance the things like, which one of your kids is older?
Well, you do take a serious
Ben,
interest in me,
Sam?
don't you? Yeah.
That's one of them. I know their names.
Well, that's okay.
That's pretty good.
That's not bad. So
Sam is older.
Nope, 50-50. You're wrong. Ben.
Ben's older.
Ben's older.
Ben's playing golf now, right?
Correct.
And I remember last year when, he had the opportunity to go to some of his golf stuff, and that's during the day. Mm-hmm. Being there, being present. It's been an interesting thing to watch. And you obviously know me. Like I care. I really want to be at my kids' sporting stuff, coach them, all that. To see the way that you work, the hours that you do put in to do a good job, but you don't sacrifice your kids. And that's something that I think, to your point, I mean, we both know a ton of people who they bought into that lie. I remember being in a men's group with these 4 other guys. This is probably close to 10 years ago. And we all said, we're young, we're hungry, we want to do great work, we want to build our businesses, we're going to grind for the next 20 years. And then by the time we're in our mid 40s or 50, we're going to have built up this thing, and then we can do all the stuff that we want to do. And I'm like, what? I got a little older, had kids. I'm like, that's like the biggest lie in the world. Mm-hmm. Like, your kids need you when they're young. That's when you need to actually be spending time building that relationship. You'll have more time to work when you get older if you want to. Like as the kids get older, more time frees up. Kids go off to college, more time frees up. Now I know you have your number, in which case you're walking into the sunset, playing your golf and sitting in the beer drinking, or sitting in the garage drinking Keystone by yourself. But that's something that's been very evident, and I know that other guys in the office have seen, and I think it helps give them a level head too of what their life should look like as they grow up in this.
Yeah, if it's perceived that I'm bagging out or just peeling out of here because I don't care and whatnot, well, that's fine. I don't care what you guys think of me. But the reality is it is a balance, and at least for me, it's never going to be perfectly struck. You know, you're always going to feel like something's giving. If you are at an event, I'm guilty of this. I'm probably the most prolific phone checker when I'm especially sitting at youth baseball. I mean,
you got a lot of time on your hands.
2 hours with 11-year-old kid pitch. You know, you would think half the audience are people the judges have sentenced to say you're going to go watch youth baseball. That's your punishment. But
I'm doing my first spring of kid pitch with both my boys.
It's bad. I'd like to tell you it's just terrific and you'll love it. It's bad. But you still want to be there, right? But I'm checking the phone, and you know, if I were instead at the office, then I would feel probably some level of guilt, being like, well, I should probably be at the baseball game. And I think it's different for our generation than certainly, if not your parents, my parents, where, you know, I don't think we were of the generation where if you didn't catch a ride or ride your bike, you didn't go. But there was a lot more slow down, you know, tuck and roll, Johnny, because your parents had dropped it off and they were out of there, right? Yeah. They weren't going to stay for games. Now you don't stay for practices and you're a deadbeat dad. So, I mean, there are these extremes, and you get the pressure on the personal front that I don't think maybe previous generations had as much. Yeah. But it is that balance, and it is, you know, we've got younger people in the office too, some of whom are having kids, some will have kids. And it's, you know, setting an example for them too, that you can do both. It is largely a choice, and I think it is kind of BS when certainly I see people now my age, mid-40s, that say, well, I have no choice. There's nothing I can do about this. Or to your earlier point, they'll say, well, there'll be that time. You know, I just got fill in the blank, X number more years, and then I'm going to do that. Then your kids are gone. Yeah. I mean, I know a guy just last year, the accounting firm said, thank you for your 25 years of service or whatever. Here's your pension. You know, more money than he could ever spend, right? And his parting gift is essentially zero relationship, at least with his older kids, and now has zero hobbies. I mean, no hobbies. And sitting in front of your iPad 6 hours a day reading sports, that's not a hobby. That doesn't count. And honestly, he's got nobody to blame but himself. He's an intelligent guy. It's like, sorry if you didn't see that coming.
Yeah. But what were you working for?
Right.
Yeah. Why do you think you're wired that way?
Wired what way? Give me.
Why? I mean, so many other people that we know, if given the opportunity to advance their career at the expense of their family, they take it. So what was instilled in you, do you think, that made you say, no, I'm gonna choose family, kids, all that, not overwork, but I'm certainly not gonna let work dictate my relationship with my kids?
I think a couple things. One, I think duty and obligation are things people talk about, but largely explain away. Now, I'm not vilifying or faulting anybody that's divorced, for example, but how many divorces are caused by people who, honestly, they just grow apart, it was a bad marriage to begin with, whatever the scenario is, justifiable, legitimate, or otherwise, versus how many people end up being extremely selfish and get engulfed in their own world, career or otherwise, and that ultimately manifests in terms of sacrificing the relationship with the partner. Now, don't get me wrong, between work, between kid duties, and kids do sometimes feel like they creep up and encroach upon and then supersede relationship with the spouse. I'm guilty of that as much as anybody, maybe more so. But I think some people kind of say, well, there's, again, back to that notion, there is nothing that I can do. No, you can control that. You have to be conscious about it and realize that it's your own personal responsibility. And if it isn't easy, that doesn't mean that it still is a responsibility that you can avoid. So I think part of that is in play. I think a duty, again, to my kids. I don't know what they'll think of me when they get older and get to an adult age. I don't expect them to revere me. My hope is that there's some level of respect there. And I have what I call adult conversations with them about how the world works in reality. And that if you want nice things and you want to have a steady, stable, home life, you have to work for it, and you have to apply yourself. And I want them to see that, but I don't want them to see, admittedly, some of the things that they do see with their peer group, and specifically their peer group's parents, where there's a lot of money, but it's a facade that I think hides a lot of, things behind closed doors that maybe I wouldn't want them exposed to. And I certainly don't want to replicate that on my end for them to see. So I think that's one thing. I think also, I think we're a society now that's gotten very, very soft. We're trying our best to become Europe. And I think that people are, and I don't mean that politically, I just mean in general, people are so quick to complain. And I do definitely agree with Tom Brokaw that the greatest generation was probably that generation that was reared during the Depression and either directly went and fought in World War II or had a large hand in it. And at least from my vantage point, what I never heard from my grandparents or any other people in that age demographic was a lot of complaining about how bad they had it growing up. I think there was a lot of gratitude that they were still alive in many cases, but that was the hand that they were dealt. And they didn't complain about it, and they made the best of it. And now the things that people choose to complain about in terms of work-life balance and, oh my God, the dishwasher isn't working or things like that. I mean, come on, let's get a little perspective here. So I tell Kelly, my wife, this all the time, that I said, I feel extremely fortunate. One, we all do by dint of birth. We were born in the U.S. That puts us ahead of at least 80% of the world in terms of opportunity. And I don't care where you land on the socioeconomic spectrum. I don't care where you land on the ethnic spectrum. The fact that you were born in the U.S. gives you so much more opportunity that a vast majority of the world doesn't have. Quit complaining and go do something with yourself. That, right or wrong, that's largely how I'm wired. If that's simplistic thinking, so be it.
All right, I got two different trajectories here. But given what you just said, I wrote this down last night because I was thinking about.
You were thinking. So
I was thinking about what to talk, where I thought this might go, or what's something about you that I've thought is interesting. This is what I wrote down. You worked for the school newspaper at the U. You worked at the Star Trib. Now you work with local to state level government employees. Why do you think you've been drawn to the intersection of government and the public so much? I pay attention to your life, Justin. I see these things.
I mean, simple answer is bad luck, poor choices, a host of things, convalescing at the same time. No, it was not by any sort of intention. Now, if I were a generation older, I probably would have made, again, I don't look at myself as having a career, but I'll say I would have made my career in the publishing industry. I find it fascinating.
Yeah.
Obviously, by the time I was at the Star Tribune in the early 2000s, to give you some perspective, you had lines crossing, so to speak, in terms of household circulation numbers. Dipped below in 2005, I think it was. They dipped below what they were in 1950. Where we're sitting right now would be a cornfield. I mean, when they built 494, there was a big uproar that they built it so far out in the middle of nowhere, no one is ever going to use it. And now if you're inside the loop, you're close to the city. So, I mean, you could tell where the publishing industry was headed. I mean, and ask Corey about that. He has a similar but different perspective of it too. So, I knew that was never a place that I could stay long term without, who wants to be the last person standing on the Titanic? I don't. So, if you can shove an old lady aside and get a lifeboat, you better take your opportunity, right? So I got out of there. But no, in terms of working,
that's what incentives and working with local municipalities was.
Exactly.
It's the lifeboat, and you shove some old lady out.
There's a fire, you climb over kids, and you get out of that building. They'll fend for themselves. But no, I think what drove me out of newspapers, media, whatever, was largely knowing that wasn't a place where I could wake up and be 46 and have some sort of a career or gainful employment even. In terms of getting into the economic development stuff, that was largely driven by me just not wanting to work in corporate America. I just didn't like it. I wasn't cut from that cloth. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm not vilifying anybody that works in corporate. I think that, there's always two sides of the coin, and I think there's a lot of advantages. For me, the disadvantages outweighed the advantages. So, basically getting an economic development was, in my opinion, my only realistic opportunity to jump in to do something on my own. And, now 20 years in, not to use my previous example of like, well, what can I do? I'm stuck. I could never do anything different. I like what I do. I don't overthink it. I don't have any, grand ambitions beyond what I'm doing right now. I like it. I think I know what I'm doing, and that's about as much as I think about it.
All right. I think there's something deeper there, but we'll talk about that later.
Yeah, if you're invited back to do more of this, maybe we can
we'll
unpack that at a later episode. So.
We'll see. The other main question that I have is just what's the primary thing that takes up space in your head when you're sitting up at night or on your drive home and you're not thinking about work, not thinking about the kids? What do you spend your time thinking about?
Well, the obvious answer is, a lot of different things, right? I mean, you do think about your job. You think about where you're shuttling kids off to that night. I think for me, I try to strike a balance. I get too caught up in planning and, thinking about the future financially, stability when my kids are older, et cetera. Again, not back to your earlier example of the group of guys you met with in your 20s who said, hey, I'm going to do this, work hard for 20 years, and then, everything's going to open up. No, there's always going to be changes and surprises. And, if you're working too much for the future, you're presumably not, enjoying the present as much or living for that. So I try to keep myself grounded in, the here and now as opposed to get too caught up in the future. I guess of late, what I've been thinking more about, I mentioned earlier under the auspices of kind of what drives me. Again, it drives me nuts. I complain as much as anybody. I'm brace yourself for this.
As much as anybody?
Maybe more, but I wouldn't call myself a naturally optimistic person.
Oh, shocking.
I know you learned something here, Royce. This is
knock me over with a feather.
I try not to be pessimistic. I would like to say I'm realistic, and
that's what every pessimist says.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, but I look at it as again, I feel extremely fortunate. Not just what I do for a living, but just in general, my life has worked out very, very well. I don't like sports analogies, but I do like the one of kind of what base did you start on in life? I would say a lot of the people I live with in Edina, I mean, it was, third base, no outs. But I think in general, back to my notion of you were born in the U.S. and if you get to adult, age and there's nothing preventing you from going out and achieving on your own, boy, you've already started on second or third base relative to the rest of the world.
Yeah.
Quit complaining and embrace that. But I also think we're seeing more and more, and this is something personally for me, I'm really interested in reading and watching over even the next decade here, is I think you're seeing more of a divide between upper middle class and the wealthy, and not even lower middle class, but just folks that are struggling to get by, that don't have to think about things that you and I do on a daily basis. And I think largely people in our socioeconomic, at our status or above, don't think that much about it and think, well, that's not a problem that that concerns me and isn't a problem that really I should have to worry that much about. But society will not function the way that it does now, a generation or two from now, if you have more and more people falling into a class where they are not only pessimistic, but they are angry about it. I don't think our political class, and I don't care who you vote for, Republican or Democratic, are doing much to address those issues right now. So that's, sadly or not, that's what I think about a lot. And I see it. I mean, we were out for dinner the other night, and you know, you go into a fast food place, 4 people, nobody's drinking alcohol or anything, and it's $75.
Yeah, I'm glad you don't drink alcohol at fast food places.
And well, some have it. This was a Punch Pizza place.
Oh, okay.
But then I see people behind the counter working at a feverish pace, thinking they're probably working only, you know, I don't want to say they're barely getting by, because then I sound not condescending, but kind of parochial, like, boy, how do they get by and whatnot. But they're hustling, and I'm equating $75 to go out for kind of fast food with people here that are probably working, you know, 8, 10, 12-hour shift and struggling to get by. That's something in society you're seeing more and more of, that I think kind of says, geez, we can't figure that out. We're kind of broken here.
Yeah. I just saw the stat that the top 10% in the U.S. are spending 50% of the money, I think, and that's up like 10% over the last 2 decades.
I read something similar, and I dare I say your numbers are actually low. And then you look at the control of wealth and those people who have the ability to invest and you know, on a compound interest basis or otherwise grow that wealth without doing anything about it, and you're just creating a wider and wider chasm.
Yeah. Well, let's see if I can circle the wagons here and bring it back to kind of what we do and what you do specifically in economic development. I mean, do you see that thing that you're thinking about, this wealth disparity? Certainly that's represented in urban or rural communities. How do you see, or do you see the work that you're doing as a lever that can be pulled to try to help with that?
The short answer is yes, through the lens of part of why do I like this? I don't take credit for any job that has ever been created from any project that I've worked on. Those are the clients I represent. Those are, you know, whether that's businesses creating jobs, the economic development people that are, you know, creating the conduit by which companies can create jobs or create more jobs and higher paying jobs. But something that, you know, I mentioned earlier is I think work is a virtue, and I think the best thing anybody can do is have a job and feel that they can grow in that job, to either leave that role, go to a different company, but continue to grow, make more money, you know, grow their skill set, you know, be better respected in their roles. But this notion that, you know, through AI or through UBI, universal basic income, eventually nobody will have to work if they don't want to, I think is incredibly stupid, and also is taking away a significant virtue that if you want to give somebody dignity, you want to give them self-worth, you want to give them purpose, give them a job, and give them an opportunity to succeed in that job, of course. Give them a job. And the fact that I'm in a job myself that helps create more jobs, and the whole economic development industry, as I told you before, is predicated on 2 things: increase the job base, increase the tax base. And historically, that job base was much more heavily weighted in terms of what got the attention. And I think that's great. We need to create gainful employment. We need to get people good jobs, good paying jobs, give them career advancement opportunities into even better paying jobs. If I can have any sort of a hand in that, I do take some purpose in that.
Cool. I think that's a good spot to
Good enough?
leave it. That's good enough.
All right.
Thanks, Justin.
Thank you.